You're listening to Feathers, a podcast of stories of women walking in faith. I hope these stories inspire you and encourage you to take flight in your own faith. I'm your host, Amy Bennett, and this is Season 9, Episode 6. Feathers is an outreach of Abiding Ministries. Find more encouragement at abidingministries.net. Well, hey friend, and welcome to Feathers This Week. As we get started this week, I want to thank our exclusive sponsor for this season of Feathers, Dayspring. If you missed it last week, I had the opportunity to interview the president of Dayspring, James Barnett. It was great to hear his perspective on how he sees ministry and business, and really the big why behind some of their products. And speaking of, let me remind you that the Encourage Women's Devotional Bible that I have a couple devotions in is out next week, October 1st, 2018. The Bible comes in 4 different covers and includes hundreds of devotionals as a companion to the Bible. You can go wherever you order your books to pre-order yours today. All right, let's get to this week. I am so excited to bring you a conversation with singer-songwriter Ellie Holcomb. After releasing her debut solo album in 2014, she won Best New Artist at the Dove Awards, and she followed that with the album I think a lot of people will know her by, and that is Red Sea Road. Ellie is now an author too. She has just released a children's book called Who Sang the First Song, and she has a companion EP with that. And y'all, I know it's just a children's book, but I am so in love with it. Like, I'm thinking about buying all of my friends a copy and sending them a care package. It has such a great message about living out the purposes God has for you. But what I think you'll be surprised to find is Ellie thought she would never go into the music industry. And it's amazing to see how God has worked in her life. I can't wait for you to hear this story, so let's get to it. Here's my conversation with Ellie. Well, hey, Ellie, and welcome to Feathers today.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness. It's so great to be able to talk to you. How about you introduce yourself and your family to those listening?
Okay. Hey, y'all. I'm Ellie Holcomb. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. I've been married to my husband, Drew Holcomb, for 12 years now. We've got 2 little kids, a little girl who's 5 going on 15 named Emmylou, and a little boy who just turned 3 named Huck, who Emmylou calls Huck-a-Love. And then we have a little boy on the way. We're actually expecting him in about 2 weeks. So I guess maybe if you're listening to this, he's already on the outside, as my children say.
Well, let me give you a congratulations then on your new son.
Thank you. We are so thrilled. So we love being parents. And then my husband and I both make music and travel for work. And our life is far from perfect, and very crazy, but also very fun.
Mm-hmm. And I saw that you actually have a kindergartner now. Is that right?
Oh, yes, which is crazy.
How did that go for you, Mama?
Oh my goodness. I was not okay I cried, I think, every day for 2 weeks before she went. And then the day she went, it was like I had let all the tears out, and it was kind of exciting to watch her like fly off into this next little season of her life. And she loves it. So we get taught every evening at dinner. She kind of like, we open her little folder and she's teaching us what she's learning at school, which I love every minute of.
Oh, that's so exciting. Oh man, I was the mama who did not cry leading up to it, but she cried buckets when she walked out, and I have video of me just sobbing while we were driving off from the carpool. I'm like, I can't believe I'm leaving my baby. Who is going to open her juice box? She doesn't know how to open her juice box.
That is it. It is a crazy, I mean, obviously, like as a parent, you know in your head that you don't have control. Like really, like there are so many things that are out of our control. But for whatever reason, when you send your little baby off all day, you're like, oh my goodness, there's so many things I'm not going to be there for. And that feels crazy to me because you feel like you're really there for almost every moment before that.
Yes. Well, I think it's great that she is having a great time, and because my daughter had a hard time for a couple of weeks, but so that's good. So as long as our babies are happy, we're happy. right?
That it really does help. She was mad. She's an older, she has like that November birthday. So
Yes,
she
mine too.
was so mad at me that I did not send her to kindergarten last year. I was like, I can't, babe. You're not old enough to go. So
Yes.
she is like a classic, like love school girl. So that is nice and
Oh,
I'm sure your daughter loves it now, right?
she does love
That's,
school to the point where she wants to be a teacher. So
oh, bless. That's so
it all
sweet.
worked out.
That's
But yeah, you
awesome.
keep in
What
this
grade is
year,
she
my
in
daughter, my
now?
oldest, the one that had a hard time, she's actually driving herself to school this year, to high school.
What?
So that was a new, yeah. So that was a new thing for us. Like it was my first year. I didn't drive her to school. Like she drove herself to school, so I had to like give her a hug
Oh my
at the
goodness.
car, and it was so weird. And that's a whole different level of letting go.
Ooh, no kidding. Yeah, I'm blessing you, and then I'm thankful that I'm not there yet.
Yes. Well, that is one thing I learned as a mom is like, don't go into the future too much because like then you're being anxious about something that is not happening yet. Because you try to put your little 5-year-old in the vehicle, right? And like that would be terrible. But like, it is a little bit easier once they get older and they're mature and it's hard to imagine, but they are ready,
Yeah,
I
you're
might
like,
not be
okay,
ready, but they're
but
ready.
they're ready to go, and I guess that's the goal. You want them to go, you want them to grow up, obviously, but yeah, I'm one of those moms. I feel very aware when people are like, don't blink, don't miss a moment. I'm like, I know, I don't want to. So that is not lost on me when people share that
Yeah,
wisdom.
for sure. For sure. So, I would love to jump into a little bit of your singing, songwriting journey that you've been on. And let me just tell you, I'm a big fan, love your music. And I've got a story to share with you later how you've actually been on the podcast before. You just don't know it.
I love it.
Yeah, but I'll share that. But I would just love for you to share with me, how did this whole deal come about? Like, did you know you were going to be like a singer songwriter, or did you like jump into it at some point,
Yeah,
down the line?
yeah. So I am like a total non-traditional. I call myself a reluctant musician. I actually I feel like most people who do music like have dreamed of doing this their whole life. And I was actually the opposite. I grew up in a family. My dad is a producer. And so I saw two things as a kid. One, like the power and the impact that music could have on people's lives. But two, as a kid growing up in the studios of Nashville and knowing artists and seeing what a life of doing music really looked like, I literally was like, that looks like the worst job ever. Like you have to leave home all the time. And so I swore I would never do music and swore I'd never marry a musician. And I also swore I would not marry my best guy friend in college. And so I always say that God has a sense of humor, because I married my best guy friend in college who was a musician and then who convinced me to quit my teaching job and join his band.
Oh my gosh. Never say never to God, right? Never say never.
I literally am like, oh man, this is hilarious, because these are all the things I had said I would not ever do. So I was in his band for about 8.5 years and, loved that. Really thought it would be like a year-long diversion, and God just kept opening doors and kind of making a way for us to making it clear that that was what we were supposed to do. Fast forward to having kids. We had our first little girl, took her on the road with us when she was 2 weeks old. By the time she was 6 months old, she'd been to 32 states in Canada. And by the time she was a year old, she'd been to most of those 32 states again, traveling mostly in like a Sprinter van. So she was in her car seat for about, I don't know, 6 hours a day, it felt like. So at that point, I really felt like when she started walking, I was like, I got to get this kid home. And so it was a really kind of scary thing to do, because we'd been building this music career together, but really, really was sensing that I needed to bring my little girl home. So we did that. Meanwhile, I've been writing songs to kind of work out my faith thought that they were just for me. And a couple months after getting off the road, since God saying, hey, would you be willing to share these songs with other people? To which I promptly replied, no, I do not. No, I am supposed to be a stay-at-home mom now. I didn't want to be a musician in the first place. But what was happening, I had started counseling and was being set free in ways that I didn't even know I needed to be set free in. And I was experiencing so much life and vitality in my faith. I sensed God asking, like, would you go back? Like, I grew up in the church and I'm so grateful for that heritage, but he was like, would you be willing to go back into the church and be a mess in front of people and proclaim my power in the middle of messes? And I was like, no, I do not want to do that, because
I love your eyes.
I'm not interested. That sounds terrifying. Like, I know this music thing is such a journey and it's a risk. And I would rather stay home. Thank you very much. And I'm so grateful that I didn't let fear keep me from following kind of where it seemed like he was asking me to go. I did want other people to know the power of his word. I'd started memorizing scripture and it was changing me. And that's where I was writing my songs from, because I'm actually terrible at memorizing scripture. So I was like, if I can write God's word into song, maybe I'll remember it. So I really thought the songs I was writing were really just for me and maybe like for my friends, and sensed from the Lord and then from a bunch of other people in my life who were hearing these songs that hey, I think you need to share these with a broader audience than just yourself and your friends. And so, man, it was a crazy thing for me to make my first full length record, because it really wasn't something I was looking for, but it's something I felt pretty called to. And at the end of the day, wanted to give like a surrendered yes rather than a no based out of fear, a surrendered yes based on the faithfulness of God.
That is so good. What helped you get over that? What helped you like practically get from that, no, never, I'm too scared, that's too much, to a surrendered yes?
To a surrendered yes. Honestly, being on my face. As I sensed God saying, would you do this? Would you do this? I think for me, it felt so scary. Like, I just had no desire to do that of my own accord. But as I got on my face in front of a very strong and faithful God and remembered and reminded myself through his word of who he is, it was extremely, that's such a humble like posture to be in, right? Like, on your face, you're like, I got nothing. I'm on the floor. I'm weeping. I'm scared. But as I encountered his presence there with my face on the floor, and sensed him saying, if I am calling you to this, I'm calling your family to this, I'm going to provide, I'm going to take care of you. And so I think it was this deal of being literally in the physical posture of surrender, of weakness, of humility, and then encountering his faithfulness and his strength in that place. And so I just thought, man, I am so scared to do this, but I know that he's good. And so if he's calling me to do this, even if it scares me, he's going to go with me and he's going to make a way for me. And so I just thought, I don't want to miss out on, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. And so I don't know if you're Enneagram people over here, but I think there was this sense of feeling like God was inviting me on an adventure, was asking me to lean into and to use and to share the gifts that he had given me with other people. And I think there was a part of me that was curious enough, even though I was scared to death, to say, and who knew enough that God was good to say, like, I think I'm willing to say yes because I don't want to miss what he's called me to. I don't want to miss out on the adventure that he's asking me to join him on, but I still feel like I'm going to throw up.
Right. Oh my goodness. This is so, it's just amazing how much is parallels. I don't know if you're friends with Jessica Honegger from Noonday.
Oh yes. I love her so much.
Yeah. Well, I just had her on. She was the gal I interviewed for our season premiere, and it was so similar. She's just saying so many of the similar things. One of the things I wanted to pull out is just how God provides not just for you, but for your family. Like if God is truly calling you to this, then he's not going to provide just for you, but he's going to provide for your family too. And I think that's just so important for all of us mamas that are listening. Yeah. Like we want to obey God, but we also want to take care of our family. And I think what we have to realize is when we're following God, he's got us all under his care. Right?
That's it. No, that is it.
You know, it's like you want to say to God, like, God, haven't you thought about my kids? Like, don't forget.
Right. Remember how we want more of those? And I probably need to be home to raise them. Like, he's like, I got it. No, that's it. That is, I mean, and that is, I remember when, on the road, I think Emmylou was probably, that's my oldest. She was probably 2 months old. She had that like hip dysplasia thing. I don't know if you know what that is, but like her hip kept popping out of socket. I had it when I was a little girl, and we had just been at the the hospital where she's getting fitted for a brace. So we were going on a 4-month tour, and I just remember feeling so overwhelmed. Like just, I don't know that I can do this, Lord. Like I don't know that I can do like being a mom in a bus or a van or a bar singing songs. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And it's an Ebenezer moment for me because, I sensed him say in this moment, I remember going to take a nap, and, I sensed him saying, hey, I know that I've given you the job of, as I laid down for that nap, just tears were streaming down my face. And I sensed him saying, I know I've given you the job of being Emmylou's mom. But before she's yours, she's mine. And I am going to take such good care of her. And so I'm like sobbing at this point. And then I felt like I heard him say, and I know that I've given you the job of being Emmylou's mom and doing music at the same time. He said, but you are my daughter, and I am going to take such good care of you. And man, I think on my face, kind of when I sensed him asking me to go release my own music, that was just when I was in my husband's band. But I think I circled back to that moment of going, okay, like before I'm a mom, before I'm a musician, like first and foremost, I am your beloved daughter, and you are going to take care of me. And then you're going to take care of my family too, because we belong to you. And that has been an extreme source of comfort, something that I come back to all the time.
That's so good. And it's amazing to me to, kind of be on the outside and then get a peek in and realize that this is truly a calling. It's not just a creative outlet or a career, but truly a calling.
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, isn't that all of us too? I mean, I just think, I don't know. I think sometimes people think you have to have this big platform for it to be a calling. And it's like, no, like he has given each of us gifts to use to make the world a more beautiful place, to fill the world with light and with his love. And we get the choice every day to say, okay, that's surrendered. Yes. Like I'm going to use the gifts that you've given me, even though this conversation or having this person over to my house or starting this business or whatever it is, this feels uncomfortable to me, but I want to ultimately say yes to using the gifts that you've given me to bring beauty into the world. And he calls us all in different ways and to different things. And so, man, it is, I think, especially having taken the leap, like I remember, we did like a Kickstarter thing to fund my first record because we couldn't pay for it if we didn't do that. I was like, oh, this is perfect. Well, now I can just fail in front of everybody if we don't hit our goal.
Yeah.
I'm like, cool. It sounds like my worst nightmare. And it felt like, that I always say it's like that scene from Indiana Jones where it felt like stepping off, where he's like walking over the abyss. It literally looks like he's going to step off of a cliff and die. But he takes that step out and like the ground, there's like a bridge that rises up beneath his feet. And that is what it has felt like as I've taken like those scary first steps, you're like, I may fall on my face in front of everybody, but I want to go where you're calling me to go, like to that deep water where maybe my feet can't touch. It has been like one of the most invigorating and exciting journeys to see the ground rise up underneath my feet over and over again as I say yes to go where he's leading.
Wow. And I love that you used the Indiana Jones because you were saying you knew that God was calling you to an adventure. And that's exactly what it's like. And I don't think you feel, as I've experienced it, I don't think you ever feel in control again. I mean, you probably grasp.
Oh, no. And
you look back and say, I would never want to do life a different way.
That's it. And I love that. Like, I don't know. I feel that sense of adventure every day. Like, okay, Lord, like who do you want to lead me to that needs me today? And who are you going to bring to me that I need today? And so there's this sense of like, that's what we were made for, is this adventure, this bigger story that God is writing, that he invites us to be a part of his kingdom coming. And so I just love this idea that we would be in this posture of like, oh man, he may be calling me to pray for this person, or just to speak to someone who's weird and freaks me out. I don't know if you've read, Bob Goff's Everybody Always, but he talks about how like God called us to love people, sometimes people who freak us out, who are like weird and we don't understand. And so this idea that he would call us to lean in and to love people who even sometimes are really hard to love, that is part of the adventure that we were made for.
Oh my goodness, I lost you on that last couple sentences. Sorry. Can you re-say about the Bob Goff? If you
yes. Yeah, no, I can totally remember. So I don't know if you've read Bob Goff or not, but he has a new book called Everybody Always, where he talks about how God calls us to love people. And it's not just the people that are like us and that are similar to us. It's like he calls us to love people that may freak us out sometimes. And so I think it's like this kind of beautiful posture of saying, okay, God, who do you want me to love? Oh, them? Even though I think totally differently than them, or I don't understand the way that they live. Yeah, he calls us to love those people too. And there's something so beautiful that he invites us to be a part of a story that's bigger than ourselves, of his kingdom coming and his love, kind of spreading everywhere, even really dark, janky, scary places. I mean, that's why he came. And he came to enter into all the messy, messed up places in our own lives and then in the world. And so the fact that we get to be any part of that is kind of exhilarating to me.
Mm-hmm. And really, I think this is speaking to the message that's in one of your latest projects. You have a new kids book out called Who Sang the First Song? And I've been able to take a look at that. And really, this is really speaking to that, is that, we have an identity in Christ. We have a creator and we have a calling. And I would love for you to introduce us to your book.
Yeah. Oh, I can't. It feels unreal when I hear people say your book. I'm like, oh, this is another thing that I swore I would never do.
Of course. You need to say, I will never be a millionaire. Like,
I'll never win the lottery, for sure not.
Yeah.
But it has been such a joy to write a book for children. And I think mainly because I, as an adult, tend to realize that I overcomplicate things sometimes. And so there has been this beauty for me, for my heart, to like rest in some of just the simple truths that are written into the gospel and that are written into the creation story. So my little girl inspired the book. She was 4 years old about a year ago and said, Mom, just in passing, like kids do, they ask questions all the time. She was like, Mom, who sang the first song? And in true parent fashion, when you don't exactly know an answer, you just turn the question back around on your kid and you're like, well, what do you think? Who do you think sang the first song? And she goes, I don't know, like Dolly Parton.
Of course, the mother of everyone.
I know. I loved it so much. So I loved how, my kids' questions a lot of times will make me slow down and think about things that I normally wouldn't. So her little questions sent me on a treasure hunt of sorts, kind of wanting to do some research on who did sing the first song. And I was so have always been inspired by Sally Lloyd Jones. Are you familiar with her Jesus Storybook Bible?
Yes. Oh my gosh. That'll make you cry every time.
Every single time. Oh, I love it so much. So that is almost a daily practice in our home is to read from the Jesus Storybook Bible or from she's a family devotional called Thoughts to Make Your Heart Sing. And the language that Sally uses to describe the creation story is she talks about it. Every time that she mentions it, she says, God sang the world into being for the joy of it. And I love that metaphor. And Sally's actually a friend of mine. We've partnered together on a couple different projects and we've toured together. And so I actually called Sally after Emilio asked me this question. I was like, Sally, is this just a beautiful metaphor that God gave you? Or is this like theologically grounded at all? And she sent me to a Tim Keller sermon. He's a pastor at a church up in New York called Redeemer. And he, was talking about Genesis chapter 1 and talks about how it's written. Genesis chapter 1 is written in the form of an archaic Hebrew poem. And he explores not so much like how God made the world, but why. And he said, it is literally as if God sang the world into being. Why would he sing the world into being? Because he made all of creation and every single one of us to sing about the extravagant love of the Creator. And I was floored by that. It resonated so deeply with me that I wrote a kid's book about it.
Yeah. And so I think we all sing in different ways, right?
That's it. That is exactly right. And it does not have to be with our voice. Which I'm so grateful for. And I do think, we all have different gifts, just like we were talking about earlier. And I love that we were all created by a really creative God and that he made each one of us to create beauty and light and love and send that out into a weary and dark and broken world. That fired.
Well, I just love that. It really resonated with me because I had a moment with God a couple years ago, as I felt him, calling me to speak, whether there's podcasts or whatever. And I'm like, God, like everybody has already said all the things like nobody needs to hear from me. And we get into that comparison game, right? Like their gifts and talents are so similar to mine. Why do you need mine? And the Lord just spoke to me like, I was actually outside. So I love this. It's like creation, right? And I hear all the different birds singing. And he said, Amy, wouldn't it be so sad if one of those birds decided not to sing because the other ones were already singing?
Oh, man.
And And he said, I want to hear you sing. And, not literally singing, because thank goodness I don't have to sing.
Right.
But I do think we're all created in different ways to sing our song, whatever our song might be and whatever our singing might be. It's all in different ways, but we are created for that.
Oh.
And I love that you are starting that with little kids and just singing, quite literally singing, because you have an EP to this too as well. But just sowing those seeds into children that they have a song.
Yeah. Well, and it is a sweet thing. Like, I just love that you're talking about the comparison thing. Cause I think there's something in us that knows, so Keller talks about like, what is God's song in Genesis 1? Like, what's the theme of his song? It's you're good. You're good. You're wonderfully made. You're loved. And so but there's something in us that knows that we're not good. Like, we're a mess sometimes. We're like a hot mess sometimes. And so he says, where else do we see the words in the beginning? And in scripture, and you go to John chapter 1. And so in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And so it's through the living Word, Jesus Christ, who died on a cross for us and rose up from a grave. It is because of him that we can be restored to sing the song that we were made to sing, that you are good, that you are loved. And I love this idea that you're hitting on. And this is what I hope it'll be, that the book will be a conversation starter for, is how can we sing not just with our voice, but with our lives? Like, what does that look like? And it doesn't have to look like an actual song. It can look like an actual song too, but I just love that idea that because of Jesus, we are invited to be like co-creators with God, like to be restored to knowing that we're good and that we're loved, and that we can share that good and that love that comes from God himself with the world.
Mm-hmm. So good. And this is really what this podcast is about. It's helping people, when they find that thing, to have the courage to be able to do that, to take the leap of faith to do it. Because sometimes, even though we're meant to do it, it still feels scary. And it still feels like that leap of faith is just like, how is this supposed to work? Or even like you, like things that you just never wanted to do.
Right. You're like, no, this isn't, not me, Lord, not me. But I think it is. I just love this idea that he gives each of us gifts. And then I like to think about it like a little plot of land, or maybe it's just a little, potted plant, or maybe it's a whole farm. But that whatever he's given us, we are called to cultivate and cause flourishing to happen from whether it's a little potted plant or a little urban, garden on the rooftop, or a whole yard, and I think sometimes we look at somebody else's yard and we're like, oh, mine's not as good as that or as big as that. And it's like, oh, but look what he's giving you to cultivate and to grow here. Don't miss that. Don't miss that. Mm-hmm. Looking at somebody else's field or plot of land or potted flower, it's like,
yes, that's so good, because, it might be a flower or it might be a vegetable you're growing.
That's it.
You just can't.
That's it.
Yeah. I love that. So, okay. So I would love to hear, so as you've stepped out, you've done the thing that you've said you never wanted to do. You've seen God providing. Like, what have you seen? And maybe, hopefully, you'll be able to think of something off the top of your head, because I didn't prepare you with this. But like, what is one of your favorite moments where you look back and you see that your work through your songwriting or your songs or even your book, you look back and say, oh, that really did touch somebody. That really maybe did make a difference, and it can help you like keep going during the hard days.
Sure. Gosh, how long do you have? Okay. So I'll tell you about my first show. So I had never played a show really by myself. I'd done, like a women's conference twice that was just put on. When I say women's conference, it was like my friends were getting all their friends together, and they had me come play like the 3 songs that I had written at the time. And so, I had never played, I'd always been in my husband's band. I had never played a show by myself at all. And one of the things that we did on this Kickstarter project that, I thought was going to fail in front of everybody, and we funded it in 3 days, which is like insane, and exceeded the goal by 250%, which was such affirmation. Like, it just was like, the Lord was like, I've got this. Like, not only are you going to be able to go make this record, look, we're going to look, there's more than enough to bring in like a nanny for the times when you have to travel. So it just was like his provision was just
more than you can ask or imagine. Yeah.
More than you could ask or imagine. That's right. And then the other thing that happened is, I had never played a show, and all of a sudden I had a tour. Like, I sold, I think, 23 different house shows through Kickstarter. And I was like, oh crap. I hope that's okay if I say that on here. You can block it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, dang it. Oh, no. I don't know how to play shows by myself. I've never done that. Now I have to go play 23 of them. So I will never forget the first house show that I did. I was so nervous. So I basically would put Emmylou down to sleep, and then I would go up to my bathroom, and because it was the furthest room away from her house, and I would like play like late into the night. So I could, cause I had never played my own songs all by myself. Like, I'd always just been sort of like a support player in my husband's band. So I was like, oh dang, I'm going to be the only one there. Shoot, I've got to like learn how to play my songs. So I will never forget the first house show that I did. My friend, it was a woman who we had met through Young Life, and she had me come play. And she was like, it's the venue where I want to host the house show is a little non-traditional. It's a little chapel. Well, I drive up to the chapel, and it is literally, I am not kidding, Amy. It is literally in the middle of a graveyard. Like like I'm turning into the address, and I'm like, we're okay. So my first show is at a cemetery. Like, what in the world? This is crazy. But as I drove up to that little tiny chapel in the middle of a cemetery, light was pouring through the windows. And it was this sense of God just saying, this is where I want you to go. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go to broken, messed up places that are full of death and heartache and sadness. And I want you to sing my light and my hope into those places. And I literally just started sobbing. I was like, okay, Lord, I am here. I am showing up. And it was so sweet that night. There had been a woman who I think she had a really, really young baby pass away, I think like months old, and had just buried her baby in that very cemetery. And she came to the show that night, and came up to me afterwards and was just sobbing. And she just said, thank you for singing hope into this place and for singing hope into me. She said, I think it will be different every time I come and visit the grave of my baby. I'm going to have some hope and some truth to cling on to. Thank you. And that is the first of thousands of conversations I've been privileged to have with people after shows, who have walked through darkness and loss, just like I have, and who have been reminded through the songs that God has given me that he's with us even in our darkest places. And I write the songs to remind myself of that. And then sometimes I'm reminded as other people come and tell me their stories of how he does that on days that I forget.
Golly. Oh, goodness. Try not to sob now. That's just beautiful, but that's what it is. Like, I just was reading in Matthew where it talks about we're the salt of the earth and the light of the world, and we don't hide it. Yeah. And that's exactly what you've been able to do, even through all the fear, and just the ways that you needed God to provide, and he has, and then he has actually done the thing that he said.
That's it.
Is actually provide hope and light,
which is crazy. And let me just add this, Amy, because I think this is important. I did not play all my songs perfectly that night. Like, I messed up a lot. Like, I forgot a lot of lyrics and forgot the chords and played songs in the wrong key. I mean, it was kind of a hot mess. It was not like this perfect show. It wasn't, it was full of faults, full of mistakes. and it was a huge deal to me. You know, I'm like, you're feeling your cheeks flush, your whole body's sweating. Cause you're like, oh gosh, I am not good enough. They know that I'm not like, this is my first show ever. You know, it's like not perfect at all. And so to have an interaction with somebody like that it was like, it didn't matter if I played every song perfectly or if I sang every note or if I remembered all of my lyrics. What happened was I was authentic and real and showed up to use the gifts that I had, flawed though they may be. And what happens when we're authentic and we're real and we show up and give a surrendered yes to God is that He's there and He shows up.
Exactly.
And
like He shows up. You have somebody else.
He uses it. That's right. Like it's not really about us, but He lets us be a part of it. And so I just want to say it was not like this perfect performance that connected. It was authentic storytelling and songwriting and showing up and just saying, I'm here and we're not alone and we're in this together. And when we do that with our lives, whether it's in a concert or in a conversation or in our own homes with our children, God shows up. And I'm so grateful for that.
That is so good. That is such a good reminder. Thank you for pointing that out, is that we don't have to do the thing perfectly, whatever He calls us to.
That's it.
We can do it imperfectly and flawed.
In fact, He knows.
So good. Well,
like He knows we're going to screw it up. And
yes.
That's why I said Jesus,
His power is made perfect in our weakness. So it's like He knows. He knows. Well, I kind of, teased at the beginning that you've been on the show before. And what I meant by that is that we had, so I had a guest back in we're in season 9 right now. So back in season 6, I had a guest named Rachel Urban, and there's no way I could tell her whole entire story. If people want to go back to that, I'll link that in the show notes. But, I did want to share, that you were part of her story. So, she talks about her and her husband were in a church that had some spiritual abuse going on, actually. And they were trying to figure out what to do. And they felt like God had called them to pastor another church. So they left. And then almost like really soon after they were called to that church, they felt God saying, okay, leave that church. And it was really confusing for her. We're like, for their family, they were like, God, but like you called us out there. Like, we know that you left us. Why would we just stay for, such a short time? And in that time is when there was If Gathering 2016, when you played Red Sea Road. And she said you had done a little sermonette, I guess, right before it, and you talked from Exodus 14:14, where it's talking about the Red Sea Road. And for her, that was, not just stepping out, but God had provided them a way from their enemies through the Red Sea. And that for her, in her situation, she had felt like God had provided them a way out of their situation. So for them, it was a Red Sea Road. Anyway, so she just said she sobbed through the entire song as she was as is in the audience. But I just thought it was interesting. You might like to know that, your songs are reaching people I'm sure but you don't know, and you never hear about. You may not hear about till heaven.
I love that. And isn't that all of us? I mean, that's such a sweet story. Like, oh man, Lord, how many times do we go through our lives and do something that impacts someone and we don't know the story, but He does. And that fires me up. It's so cool.
Yes. Yeah. You'll have to go back and listen to the whole story. But I mean, I just think that's so cool. And I just think it's so cool that, I don't know, that for me, I mean, just me personally, it's just to hear that story and then to have you on, and it feels like a full circle moment. And oh my goodness. So just thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely. It has been my joy. Thanks for having me, and thanks for sharing that story. That's beautiful.
Okay, well, we talked a little bit about your new projects coming up. So give us just a little bit more detail when they're coming out, where people can get them, and how they can connect with you.
Sure. So we, the EP is called Creation Songs. It's called Sing Creation Songs. And so it is coming out. You'll be able to pre-order it starting Thursday, which is pretty fun. And that'll officially release September 21st, available on iTunes and on my website and on Spotify. And then I think it's available on Spotify, actually. My manager is going to be like, Ellie, no, it's not, but just check there anyway. And then the book will come out on October 4th, and it's available Amazon, at all your Lifeway stores, and I kind of can't believe it. But
and I would just say, I know it's supposed to be kids, but I'm just telling you, as an adult, it's a message that you need to hear as an adult too.
I love that so much. Yes. That's awesome.
So everybody needs to pick it up. I don't care if you have kids or not.
That was my goal for the book and for the songs, that they would be a gift to big and little hearts. So
well, thanks
for saying that.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again for being with me, Ellie.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Do you not just love Ellie? And I love Ellie's story because it reminds me of a few things. The first is where the Bible talks about how man makes plans, but the Lord directs his steps. I mean, can you even imagine if Ellie was not in the music industry, or she said no when God asked her to share her own solo music? Man, it's just such a good reminder to me that, like, we think we know what's going on and what we should do and what we shouldn't do and what we need to do, but really we just don't. It's so humbling to say that, but we just really don't know. I mean, God has the plans we can't fathom, or maybe there are plans that we could fathom, but we just flat out don't agree with God that we want to do them or they should be done. And yet people like Ellie, who have done the things that they said they would never do, they can look back and say, well, yep, God, you had it right, even when I didn't think so. So if God is asking you to do something that you have just said you would never do, let me just challenge you to say yes to God. The other thing her story reminds me is that God provides, wherever and however God calls you to serve your sphere of influence, whether that means staying at home with babies or going to an office or taking your babies with you on an RV, however God is calling you to serve your sphere of influence, God will provide what you need and also will provide for your family. So if that is something you're struggling with, God is calling you to do something and yet you just don't see how it can work out, God will provide. All right, guys, for those of you that have stuck through this episode, I wanted to let you guys know that Ellie has been so gracious to offer a giveaway of her book and EP to 2 of you. Ooh, so exciting. So this is going to be an Instagram giveaway. Over at our account, you can find us at Abiding Ministries. Head over there and you'll see her photo for the episode, and that will have all the instructions you need on how to win this set. So good luck. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening today. I appreciate you every week showing up with me. So we'll see you next week. On Feathers.